What is up, all you Mongols and Womongols? Welcome to The World is My Burrito, aka Twimby, the non-discriminatory podcast where I sometimes change everything at the drop of a hat. But the thing I never change is me, your host, Corey T, coming at you from Tampa, Florida, this fine Monday, June 5th, 2023. Bringing us to episode number 18, let's talk about Ghost of Tsushima featuring Erik Slader. Straight away, let's get into some kitchen keeping. You may have noticed this episode seems pretty short to be filled with two people interviewing and have tons of facts and stuff built into it. After much deliberation, and in an attempt to make the most of post-frequency and my upcoming time away, I have decided to split my Ghost of Tsushima episode into two parts. What you're currently listening to is part one. Not only does it seem like enough on its own, but the editing was already complete. This allows me the freedom to complete my further breakdown of the game in a solo episode that will probably be about the same length as this one. There was plenty of information readily available in this game, so it was like real easy to stack that episode up. If you haven't played Ghost of Tsushima, you're going to be awfully confused, so maybe resheath this burrito until you know the way. So without further ado, let's talk about Ghost of Tsushima. Erik, thank you for joining me for our long-awaited Let's Talk About Ghost of Tsushima gameplay. What's going on, bud?
Not too much. I'm, glad to be back. For the listeners that don't know this, this is something we've been planning for a while now. I want to say we've been talking about doing this for a couple years. We finally did get to that Epik Fails episode, which we'll talk about later in the episode, I'm sure. But yeah.
I think the first time we talked about covering Ghost of Tsushima and Mongol invasions was like beginning of 2021.
That sounds right. That sounds about right.
Yeah, it was either like very end of 2020 or like very beginning. We're talking like January, February of 2021.
Yeah, we've had a lot going on, both of us.
This part, and the reason why we're here together is it started off as like, hey, Epik Fails, you cover real history, real failed history, as is in the title. And it was just too perfect for like Ghost of Tsushima releasing, talking about the Mongol invasions, which were a pretty epic failure.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I really wanted to cover the gameplay aspect of it.
Synergy.
Yeah, so it seemed like it was better to make this a two-parter and split it between podcasts to better advertise the other one, kind of thing. For my section of it, we were going to be chatting about Ghost of Tsushima, the game, and kind of covering all of the aspects of it.
That's right.
But Erik, he has not quite completed the full gameplay himself.
No, I have my reasons.
Life happens.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but it's there can be a lot to it.
Oh yeah.
But Erik did take the time to watch all of the main game story.
Yeah.
So he's caught up on that.
Exactly.
And I mean, the more important part the more important reason of him being here is kind of like, now that he's seen that, comparing a lot of the history with it as well.
Definitely.
But before getting too deep, how do you feel about Ghost of Tsushima, the gameplay so far?
So I should state that right away. Like, I freaking love this game. It's gorgeous. The sound design's incredible. The look of the game is phenomenal. The voice acting is just next level. The storyline's great. And I think the game mechanics are flawless. The thing that really stands out to me is the attention to detail, the weather effects, the music, the sound design. Like, I could just go on and on, it's one of those things you can just leave on in the background and it's like, yeah, that's the stuff. The only reason I haven't beaten the game, it's not that I haven't been enjoying it, but, I've just got a lot, I've had a lot of like podcast projects and writing projects and home improvement projects and all kinds of things come up. And as much as I like gaming, it's not, something I do all the time, if that makes sense. Like I actually have to make time for gaming. And I think you can relate to that as a creative as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of my gameplays for Ghost of Tsushima were actually 80 hours each.
Oh my God. That's a lot of time. That is
and
a lot
the
of
first
time.
one was without the DLC, and the second one was with the DLC. I did like a new game plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
That's
there's
awesome.
a lot to it, and like the only reason I just sat and dedicated time to playing the game the second time was for this episode.
Yeah.
I think I
doing a
finished it in like a
deep
week
dive.
and a half or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I get it. It can be a really long game.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, how do I put this? Like, I loved Breath of the Wild, right? Like it's my favorite game. It's one of my favorite games now, but it took me like 4 years to beat. And part of that's because I was enjoying it so much. I didn't want it to be over. Every time I was playing it, I kind of soaked it in and, got lost in the exploration of it. And it's the same thing here, it's the same kind of experience for me. Like, I don't want to be like so honed in on the story that you know what I mean? Like it's not, I'm not in there for the challenge. I'm there for the experience. And I'm going to go ahead and blame my ADHD here because like I bounce from side quest to side quest constantly when playing this game. There's so much going on, and I love it. I do love it. It just that's why it's taken me so long.
Yeah, it does have a lot to offer. I feel like the side quests in here are at least worth it because they're world building.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, a lot of character development, which is cool.
Yeah, character, and like you have the main quest, you have the I guess necessary side main quests.
Oh yeah. There's certain ones that definitely play into the main story.
Yeah,
like
that
in a
you
big
have to
way.
do, and then there are side quests. So it's like there's a main quest, there's side quests, and then there's like sub side quests.
Yeah. If I would say like if it's an important one, you'll get a lot more cutscenes. There's still a lot of dialogue and stuff in the side quests, but it's when it cuts to a lot of cutscenes with certain characters, like, oh, this is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and actually, this is something that I don't think I know about you.
Sure.
Have you watched a lot of Kurosawa's samurai films?
So I hadn't prior to the pandemic, if that makes sense. Like I had seen, and I don't think Lone Wolf and Cub is one of his, right? That's a whole separate thing.
Yeah,
I'd seen a couple of those, and I was familiar with at least Seven Samurai, but I don't know if I had ever seen it all the way through until, like I said, 2020 happened. And that's when I really started getting into some of that stuff. After really getting into the kaiju stuff again, I decided to check out Hidden Fortress. I rewatched Seven Samurai, loved the hell out of it. And I just really dig his style. There's a few on my list that I'm planning to check out. Rashomon, I think, was one of them. Is that his as well? Yeah, that's next.
So I mean,
me.
he has a lot of good stuff, but personally,
yeah,
Rashomon is still like my favorite of his movies.
Oh yeah, I've heard good things.
Yeah, everything he does is amazing, and I know Seven Samurai, like it's really hard to beat, but
it's inspired
there's just
so much.
something. Yeah, like Seven Samurai is like top tier, one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah.
But of his content, Rashomon offers me what I like to see more. So yeah, do you feel with the little bit that you've seen so far, do you feel the Kurosawa influence in the game?
Oh yes, it's all over it. This is a loving homage to his movies and his style. And what's really cool is there's a mode of the game where you can play it in black and white with that scratchy film filter. And I believe it's even in Japanese with subtitles. Is that right?
You can play it in Japanese with subtitles any way that you want.
Oh wow, yeah.
But yeah, it is straight up called Kurosawa mode.
Yeah, and I love that's a thing. I did play part of the game like that. just for fun.
Yeah, I started in Kurosawa mode, but it did not last too long. It is really cool, and at least the game, if memory serves, it's pretty easy to just like switch the modes.
Yeah.
So if you're having troubles with something or you need color, you know, you can just go back to color, and then if you want the epic thing, just switch over to Kurosawa mode.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, the colors are amazing in this game. Like, the game looks great on its own, but it's just like if you want to replay the whole game in Kurosawa mode, like that's a whole new experience, you know, way to experience it, you know?
Yeah, it'd be like playing a completely different game.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you feel about the story?
Okay, so I love it. Like, you know, there's not many things where I would watch an 8-hour like playthrough of something, but this one was really, really good. You know, right away when I first started playing the game, it opens with that epic, like, freaking opening with the battle and everything. Like, it really sucks you in. It feels like a movie right away, like an interactive movie, you know, the dialogue and everything. The writing is on point, man. You get introduced to the villain, Kodan Khan, really interesting character, even though he's like technically fictional. He's kind of an amalgamation of different people. And that's the same with like Jin Sakai and Lord Chimera. I don't know how far you want me to go into the story at this point, but I do have notes there.
Yeah, you can go into it, because my only note was really like, how do you feel about the overall story, and then kind of, you know, how do you want to blend it into the actual history?
So yeah, I really liked Jin's story arc during the game. Not only does it feel like like we said, a classic samurai movie, it really kind of reflects the samurai code of Bushido, which, for those that don't know, is sort of like the Knight's Code of Chivalry. It's a little different. It's all about honor, though. But especially with how Jin is forced to take on, you know, ninja-like tactics in his mission, he kind of becomes like a guerrilla like a guerrilla fighter against the Mongols. But that's not the samurai way, you know. And even though he's kind of right by doing so, he's also betraying his code, and that becomes a very big sticking point, especially for his uncle, Lord Chimera.
That is like it's the kind of fight in the game. And I mean, they address it pretty early on, and then kind of, you know, keep writing it throughout a lot of the story.
But the way they weave that in, though, was so good. I was not expecting them to have that level of what do you call it? Just commitment to making this a real, like, you know, like a samurai story, you know what I mean? Because I've read like 47 Ronin and some of that stuff, and it really played into that kind of stuff, you know?
It hits very much like that, yeah. The betrayal, because, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he really is betraying his own code.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to defeat the Mongols.
Exactly.
You know, they are already very well aware of the customs, and that there is like a little bit of real world history there, where there was
exactly
not a Chinese emissary, but it was a Chinese kind of like informant or spy. I don't really know the right word, but he basically just went there to kind of observe the area and see if there was anything worth it in Japan.
Sure. And
he went back and said there wasn't. Like, there's literally no reason for anyone to go here. Oh, wow. You know, it's a shithole. And the Mongols decided to invade anyways. But they had a solid idea of how the samurai fought, and they knew that the samurai liked this one-on-one thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're not about one-on-one, we're about winning.
Yeah, exactly. The Mongols are ruthless. And I think part of the thing was Japan was very closed off from the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so they didn't encounter that kind of warfare prior to this, you know, so they weren't really prepared. But yeah, it's really interesting. We'll get into that history stuff a little bit more in a second, but
but for the overall story, it is just marvelous. You know, Jin is constantly doing the right thing, but he's only ever troubled by it.
Yeah, he's conflicted constantly, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you as the player, like, yeah, I don't know what the right decision is here, you know? Like,
Yeah. You are like you have to go through the routes that you're going. And there are some missions that require you to not be seen, so you 100% have to assassinate people.
oh yeah, stealth missions, which I'm terrible at, but I enjoy them. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? You know, like I like the concept of stealth missions, but I'm kind of terrible at them. Like,
Yeah.
it's what I want out of a Bond game, if that makes sense. But like, I don't know if I'd be good at it.
But it is good because that forces, like story-wise, there are those missions that it forces you to do the wrong thing.
Yes.
According to your own, his own code, which is your own code.
Well, like there's a lot of interesting moral ambiguity with that stuff. Like the big one, of course, is the poisoning.
Yeah, which comes pretty, well, not late into the game, but it does come much later in the game.
For sure. But they build up to it in a really interesting way.
They really know how to do a lot of impactful scenes because, like, the first time you assassinate someone, it's pretty jarring.
Yeah.
And the first time you poison someone, it's in a pretty, like, there's no way that you can fail kind of setup, and they try to make that pretty jarring as well, that it's like you're really, taking advantage of this situation.
Yeah.
But it is like a necessary evil for all intents and purposes.
Definitely. And they do a good job of weaving all these like clever flashbacks in, the way the tutorial feels like just a natural part of the storyline, because you get to flashback to Jin's training. And I thought that was clever. I'm sure other games have done this, but probably not as well, because not only was it a tutorial mission, for lack of a better term, it was also setting up character dynamics that definitely paid off later on. And, it comes full circle by the end, back to that same place,
Yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned the stealth missions, like the initial stealth mission teaches you how to sneak around, but it also gives you a lot of subtle world building, in that scene, and exposition, between Jin and Yuna. But yeah, as the story went on, there was an exciting moment for me as I was watching it, because like I said, I played a good chunk of the game. I played more than I had thought I had. I want to say I got like a quarter of the way through the game, right before I decided to do the video just to catch up for the podcast. But one thing that kind of surprised me, and I'm surprised I didn't catch on to it earlier, was that a lot of the characters he was meeting along the way would end up coming back. Like he was forming like a group, I guess, like his own clan. A little bit.
Yeah, forming his own little, like, Seven Samurai kind of thing.
Yeah, and the moment where I realized that was the case, I got so excited. I was like, oh shit, they're putting the band together,
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of great characters you come along, and then to see them come back into the story, and it's like, holy shit, it was all leading to something. That was awesome.
And each of their, like, independent tales, the way everything is set up is just beautiful, because
yes.
The Mongol invasion affected everyone differently.
Yes.
And it's man, like, it's kind of really hard to describe. Like, not that I'm against spoilers, but you'd have to go into so much detail to describe how it truly affected everyone. But it was just marvelous in how, like, for some people, the Mongol invasion just gave them an opportunity. For other people, it kind of, fucked up a little bit of their life, so they did what they could to survive. But there's so many layers to what happened within each individual story. And for the most part, the way that it generally works is, like, Jin meets someone,
yes,
and then they kind of, like, go away to do their own thing, and then you bring them back. Or maybe they go away when you have completed helping them, and, like, the story is, they will come back when you need them.
Exactly. But there, when it comes to the main story, there was a lot of I don't know if they're twists, but there was a lot of points where I didn't see it coming. Like just when you think the story's going to zag, it zigs and you're like, oh shit, you know? One of the main things for me was his uncle, Lord Shimura, kept surprising me because I thought they were like setting him up to like die tragically and then he had to avenge his death, but that was not where they were going with it. You know, he survives initially. You actually rescue him. And then there's the whole bit where his uncle wants to adopt him as a son, which is all the more heartbreaking when he then turns his back on him because, you know, he betrayed the code. And then he's almost an adversary by the end, you know. He is an adversary, you know. There's that epic,
because he is 100%. And it's like, that's so great because everything he does fails.
Right. Yeah.
But the uncle's the only person who doesn't see that because he is 100% dedicated to his code.
Yes.
But they kind of make it a point where it's like everything he does miraculously, or not miraculously, but like it fails so epically.
Yeah.
And the only time he ever wins is when Jin does, like, quote unquote, the wrong thing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. When he betrays his code. When he breaks the code. That's the only time that so good.
His uncle can ever progress. The way they advance that is just so good and it's so powerful. And then at the very end, like, it's even more heartbreaking that like the last thing that happens is the uncle gives you an ultimatum.
Yeah. Man.
And it's like, shit, man. Like, you know, he's like, I'm like, you either kill me or I am gonna hunt you down for the rest of your life.
What's awesome about that, though, is everything's leading to that inevitable conclusion, right? That face-off. Yeah. And you don't see it coming, or at least I didn't. You know, like, I don't know. I figured he would, like, forgive him or, like, see the error of his ways or something. But he's so freaking, like, attached. You know, he's so gung-ho about the right way of doing things, you know?
I think, I mean, it was definitely in the same boat where it's the ending isn't necessarily a surprise.
Yeah.
You know, it is like a logical conclusion.
Yeah.
You know, based on the character traits, but it's one of those that you're hoping that maybe the uncle will just ignore you.
Yeah. Like exile you or whatever.
Like he'll disavow you, but then also ignore that you were doing anything wrong. And like just leave it. You know, maybe the most you would get is just like never talking to him ever again.
Yeah, which would be sad in its own right, but the way they did it was, oh my god.
Just and even like the worst
out.
Yeah, the worst part is, and the game uses it so powerfully, but a lot of the walking scenes are very good because those are there's so many tragic moments. But like still on the final bit of it,
the funeral scene, like early on in the game.
Oh yeah, one. Where you have to slowly walk and people are offering their condolences.
Yes, that was such a good setup for everything, really. You know.
Yeah,
and you go there again later on. There's like you revisit that area and it's a different season. A lot's changed, but you can tell it's like that same area. You know.
But no, the final bit in the game before you fight, you know, I don't know what all the videos showed you, but do they show you Jin and Shimura walking together?
Yes. Yeah, they walk to the grave side of his father, I think.
At the very end?
Yeah, towards the very end.
Okay, before the duel.
Yeah, that part was important, I thought.
Yeah, and it's so like subtle, heartbreaking because you kind of, when you are at that point, you know what's going to happen.
Yep.
And then they both stop to help a guy who's delivering supplies to the Ghost's army.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like his carriage got stuck against a rock, so they have to help get it over it, or like in the mud or something.
When I got to that point in the story, I was like, wait, are they getting into the DLC now? Because it felt like the main story was over, but then I didn't realize where it was going at first. That
like, it wasn't quite over yet. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the real story. It's almost like the Mongols were like, secondary. I mean, obviously they're a pretty big, important part, but you know, it's really about this relationship.
Yeah. But you get those last, what you find to be the last few words they'll ever have one way or another.
Yeah.
They're never going to speak again beyond this point, and that the uncle still helps the ghost's army. The support for like the ghost army, it's like he'd probably be annoyed at the ghost, but he might never have hunted the ghost down had it not been Jin.
That's the thing.
Because the ghost never broke protocol. It's Jin that broke protocol.
Oof. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that is marvelous.
Again, great storytelling. Just, it doesn't matter if it's a movie, game, anything. This is just really good storytelling.
And without going into like heavy detail for each of the individual side characters, the side stories are all so great.
Yeah.
And again, very unique because they all have different reasons. Some of them aren't even fighting the Mongols.
Well, like Yuna and her brother, right?
Yeah.
That was, oh my God, that was so heartbreaking. There was a lot of emotional scenes in this. I loved the one character, the sake brewer. What was his name?
Kenji.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, he was awesome. And then the
Kenji's
guy who
kind of like the comic relief.
He was.
There's
good.
no other tales. Like you kind of I think Takeo is Yuna's brother. But he's a little more like, his is like the motivating tale.
Yes.
The little guy that but he's the little guy that can do great things because he's an amazing blacksmith. Well,
and there was the bowmaster. Again, I don't have the names in front of me. I apologize. But you know who I'm talking about. His whole story line about his apprentice who betrayed them, and you kind of saw why. He's kind of a dick. It's like,
yeah, and he's kind of a solid view of. Well, he's the other end of, like Shimura, basically.
Yeah,
he's not as hard into Bushido, but he sees things in only one way. He's like, well, she's betraying me. Yeah. He always had suspicions. And so he's like, well, this is the only, the only answer is that she's evil, not realizing that she's not.
Look at
she did what she,
yeah.
She did everything she could to survive. And though they did watch her kill Japanese people, that's kind of one of the decision-making points. Like when she's explaining herself, is she's like, I did it because I am going to shoot them in the head to kill them quickly.
Yes.
Whereas the Mongols that were there, like, they are training and they're just gonna shoot anything while they're still alive and dangling.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was almost a mercy on her part,
Yeah. They were mercy killings.
Yeah.
Because like her final mission is to upset the Mongols.
Yeah.
Like basically destroy everything that she worked for.
Yeah, no, totally.
Which is solid, like teach a bunch of people and then kill all of them. You've killed the best archers the Mongols have to offer. So that is kind of a common thing. Well, I guess not this exact story, but that is a good example of how the stories sway. Like there's a lot of gray areas.
Oh yeah, it's all
the game can be in black and white, but all the stories are 50 shades of gray.
Yeah. Not that 50 shades, but yeah.
Yeah. But it is so interesting that each story, they can be, some of them are like uplifting and then they crush you. And then some of them are
that one
almost
family there were so many. There's a lot of little ones, and again, some of this didn't make it into the main story, but when I was playing it, there's a lot of side stories and some. It's best when the best ones are when something's implied, and you're like, oh shit, like it dawns on you, and you're like, damn, they really went there. Oh man, I can't even get into it.
Sure if it happened or not.
Yeah, there's so much, and the setting a lot of times tells a story too. When you go to a town and it's all abandoned or like stuff's burned down and it's like, oh man, what happened here? The houses are ransacked, all that kind of stuff.
And the enemy diversity does help with that same thing.
True.
Where like the enemies, you may go into somewhere and the enemies are raiders, not Mongols.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You
you
got
know,
the
stuff
Straw
like that
Hat
really-
Bandits too.
Yeah. Which that,
Ends up playing in, of course.
yeah, they also like really suck as well.
Yeah.
But again, like the gray area thing, there's so many tales. A lot of people, several of the tales involve like doing what you can to stay alive.
Yes.
But then the effects that has are all very different. And like none of them are ever connected, which I also kind of like because that shows how, even though it's on one small island, how big everything is, that like none of these tales ever cross paths.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense from a gameplay perspective, because it's not linear, so it's pretty clever that they were able to do that, but it feels like it is part of a bigger narrative at the same time. Oh, one more character thing. Who was the guy in charge of the Straw Hats?
Ryuzo.
That was a great character because you could see how conflicted he was multiple times. And like his betrayal, like I kind of had a feeling, but I was like, I hope he does the right thing. And then he's like, nope, he fucking stabbed you in the back. But then that comes back later and man, it was good. That was good.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like the individual stories are kind of they're their own like micro movies.
Yes.
Kurosawa movies where it's like one pulls from one movie, another one pulls from another movie kind of thing. Even if overall, that was the thing, which we mentioned, like the overall thing is like a love letter to Kurosawa.
Yeah, it's like an interactive Kurosawa movie.
Yeah.
At times.
Like bonus features, you can pick your own Kurosawa film
Yes.
and ending. But yeah, the characters, each one of them, like it's a lengthy game, and the characters' stories themselves are very lengthy, and very well developed. I loved all of them, and good, like happy or sad. I don't think nobody had a happy ending.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Bittersweet at best, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I survived
Nobody
that
had a
horrible
happy
thing.
ending, but
I'm going to have PTSD for the rest of my life, but I'm alive.
but that is kind of, it's war.
That's life.
Like no one can be
War.
happy.
Exactly.
Now, outside of the characters and onto the actual history,
Yeah, let's do it.
How do you feel about, like they've announced plenty of times that this was fictional. Like they never intended this on being a direct representation. But for the history that we learned, how do you feel about the differences?
I honestly think they did an amazing job with it. Like you said, it's not exactly based on a true story, but it is still very good historical fiction, I think. It's set in feudal Japan, specifically takes place during the Mongol invasions of Japan of 1274 and 1281. I think this is the first Mongol invasion of Japan specifically.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is Iki Island and Tsushima, I believe, were the first two that they landed at, the Mongol fleet. So there is some real history going on here, but it didn't quite happen that way, the way we're shown in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like some of the changes in it because like it's about the Mongol invasion, and like basic Mongol invasion history is that they lost due to the weather.
Yes.
Like kamikaze is divine wind, and the thing that helps you throughout the entire game is wind.
I was gonna point that out. Yeah, I loved that about it.
In this game, it's kind of like metaphorical, where like in real history, actual wind won the battle.
Yes.
But in this one, the wind is the thing that's guiding the hero, and the hero's the one who wins the battle.
Yes.
So it is still the divine wind that is helping to win in the end. I dig that connecting thread, where it's like they're just repurposing the wind.
Oh, totally. I love that that's a game mechanic. It's like, yeah, that, yes, they didn't follow the history, but it'd be kind of hard to build a game around that. You know what I mean? Because it would have to most likely take place at Hakata Bay, and then it would just be one battle, and then 10 years happen, and then another battle. You know what I mean? Like
you'd lose in the first act without any effort.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to do like a character-centric story around that. Like you could have a bunch of different character stories, but it would be the same battle over and over again from different perspectives. So like, it's interesting because, there are some unknowns here. So they kind of like weave this story and like, well, what if, what if this happened? What if that happened? And I like it because it feels like, again, they call him the ghost. He's a legend. He's not real. He's a myth. And it feels like maybe the story of Tsukasada was maybe an inspiration for Jin.
This also precedes ninjas. Ninjas did not exist at this time.
Exactly.
So, which is why they call them ghost instead of like ninja or shinobi or something.
Right. That's a good point.
Because this is before that was ever a thing.
And as far as the storms, that's a big thing throughout the game if you're looking for it. The weather effects, which are amazing. Something really clever I noticed as I was playing and as I was watching the story as well. This kind of ties in the historical angle is as the story progresses, there's a storm approaching off the coast, right? And towards the end, it really picks up. And by the end, it's like a torrential downpour and, there's lightning and shit. And it's like, that's clever. I see what you did there.
Yeah. There is a storm coming in and it does get worse. And like the final battle is fought in the storm.
Yeah. And again, the wind was a big element in the game. It guides your actions and, felt divine.
So one of the other massive differences is there was no Khotan Khan.
Right. Yeah. And I think I mentioned that, he was made up for the game, obviously, but he's also kind of inspired by a few different figures. There were people like this, Genghis Khan had all kinds of, he had a bunch of sons and a lot of them were warlords and, there was Ogadai and then of course Kublai Khan himself. But the thing is Kublai Khan didn't join this fleet, so it sort of felt like, well, what if he did decide to come along? This might be kind of how that would play out, I guess.
And at the moment, I can't remember if they even ever mention Kublai Khan.
They do. I was looking for it. It actually happens really early on. Well, I think, I know Genghis is at least mentioned because...
But he is kind of a nice combo, instead of the Khan actually coming, because by this point in time, like the Mongols were large enough that the Khans did not need to do anything.
They just sat on their
Genghis's time.
Yeah.
But it is neat. You have instead of just an overwhelming battle where the entire island just gets stomped on and then they leave, you get to see like the face of the Mongols. Like the Mongols have a face that you can hate on as opposed to. So they are still an overwhelming power, and like
he's a personification, of the entire armada.
And the Mongols, a lot of the early Mongol history, they, like in a weird way, they fought for justice. They fought to free people from the mundanity of like themselves.
Yes.
And they fought to stop the bickering. It's like they killed the shitty people.
Yes.
And then, his intent was to gather people under the blue sky.
Yeah, I mean, his methods were flawed, but it's not a bad concept. I'm not saying Genghis Khan was right, but
he had a very like we're gonna free the shit out of you mentality.
In fact, and we again talked about this on the Epik Fails episode, but like they were all about like you can join us and no harm will come to you, but if you fight back, you're gonna rue the day, basically. Like
And that's what Khotan does in the game is he's like, look, all you have to do
Yeah.
is just like give up. And in a way, it seems like they very much, trying to think, it's not the Mongols that are usually like attacking loose citizens. I want to say it's usually bandits, like your own people.
Yes, that's true.
You know, so there is this interesting like aggressive peace. Mm-hmm. You know, there is still peace there. So this is this very like Genghis Khan kind of mentality.
Yep.
And he did kill, like, with no effort, kill the first samurai on the beach.
Oh, and that scene was brilliant too, because it was like a maybe not a metaphor even, but like stuff like that probably happened because of the way the samurai were expected to fight, you know, like the one would stand, you know, like approach and like shout out his name and his lineage and prepare for one-on-one combat. And I love the way that Kodan in that scene is just like so nonchalant about it and like throws a cup at him and lights him on fire, you know?
It's one of those that it's like this, it's the display of power and then saying, hey, join us. And
join us or die.
Everyone's like, hell no. And then all the samurai lose.
Yeah.
There are these good like historical comparisons. Again, it was never meant to be historically accurate.
True.
Oh yeah. So I mean, you have Jin, who's based on legends. You have Khotan, who's kind of the face of and kind of semblance of like Genghis Khan.
Yep.
You know, he is the face of what the Mongols want to achieve.
Right.
And then, you know, they throw the wind in there as well.
Yeah, and Lord Shimura, in a lot of ways, is kind of the ultimate samurai of this era, right? Like, you know, he's by the book, you know?
Yeah, where, you know, honor was more important than life itself.
Exactly. And one other thing I feel like we should point out, I don't know if you're going to get to this later, but, there's a reason the game's won so many awards, but the country of Japan itself actually awarded the creators of the game by making them real-life ambassadors of Tsushima Island, which I think's incredible.
I don't think I've hit that part of research yet, so that's pretty cool to learn.
Yeah. So, like, of course it's not historically accurate. They weren't going for that, but the attention to detail, like Tsushima itself and the look of things and the costume designs and all that, pretty spot on, I think. Sure, I'm sure creative liberties were taken here and there, but you know.
Yeah, there are that is something that I do end up covering is like outfits and language and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because there is some history in here. So outside of actual history in modern day, how do you feel about the movie announcement?
Oh man, I'm excited. So yeah, as soon as I finished the game, I was like, there has to be a movie of this. Like, usually that's not the case, like, because of course we've had a lot of shitty game adaptations, like we talked about recently on Podcasters Disassembled with the 90s Super Mario Brothers movie. But you know, with like the new Mario movie coming out, Sonic the Hedgehog was really good. HBO's The Last of Us was maybe one of, you know, the best adaptations I've ever seen. Even though they changed certain things, it was like really freaking good. Yeah, I'm here for it, man. I've read a few things. Apparently, the director Chad Stahelski. Yeah, I wasn't too familiar with him, but apparently he's the dude that directed John Wick. He started out as a stunt choreographer, and according to IMDb,
and double.
He was a stunt double for, I believe, Brandon Lee in The Crow, right? He's
been the stunt double for like quite a few important movies.
That's awesome.
Even as far back as Bloodsport.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So he's been in the game for a while. His only 4 directorial, like solid directorial titles are for the 4 John Wick films, so the one that just released as well.
Yeah.
And then he's got 11 other films slated to be released.
That is insane. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Good for that guy.
I like it's cool that they're doing a movie. Like, part of me is like, I don't think we need a movie because the game is so detailed.
It is. It's really good.
Like, the story is so a lot of the focus. Yeah.
The bar is so high.
And again, like, even my second playthrough for the game plus DLC still took me 80 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like there's so much to watch and like so much to be involved in. And right now the only 4 things he's actually done are John Wick 1 through 4. And that is extremely action oriented.
Yeah, but he's very style over substance, which could be a good thing. Maybe? Yeah.
So we'll see. I thought it was interesting. Like, you know, I'm I think happier for, you know, the creative crew for Ghost of Tsushima that,
Right.
you know, Hollywood's like, yo, this shit needs to be a movie.
Yeah.
More power to them. But we'll see how this turns out. Because I feel like it's either going to be like a full ass universe. You know, it's going to have to take more than one movie.
Right.
Because like the story, for me, the story of Ghost of Tsushima, and I think they even bring it up in some of the interviews, like the main story that you play is Jin Sakai's, but that doesn't mean that he's the main story. The main story is everyone's story. He is just the one helping you see the rest of the island's story.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the main gameplay story, but the story is about Tsushima.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in, like, are they going to try to make this solely about Jin, or are they going to bring in others?
I hope it's I hope we at least get to see his crew, you know what I mean? And some of that developed. Like all those characters are really important to me. But yeah, I think it really is going to be focused on Jin and his uncle, you know. We'll see. I've got high hopes. The one thing that does really get me excited for it is that he said that they're going with the full Japanese cast, which is of course, like, obviously the right way to go, you know. 20 years ago in Hollywood, that may not have been the case, unfortunately, you know, but I'm glad that we've come that far, at least, you know, like they at least got that part right, we know. So
trying to get even more accuracy.
Yeah, but as long as they try to, I think, stay true to the themes of the game, I think that's what's most important. You know, the themes of Bushido. You know, if that comes through, I think it could be incredible. So
basically, the only way it can be done right is if Chad makes a modern day Kurosawa film.
That's kind of, yeah. So again, the
bar,
the bar couldn't be higher. So
yeah.
Again, if they,
good luck, Chad.
Yeah, I almost feel bad for him. I almost feel bad for him, but like, I hope it's good. That's all I can do, right? Like, I'm not worried because, you know, if it's not good, we still have the game, you know, like that's fine. But yeah, I'm definitely, you know, I'm a fan of this game. I'm going to keep playing it, you know, as much as I'm able, you know, exploring and immersing myself in the world.
You'll be able to finish it before the sequel comes out.
Yeah. Is there a sequel in the works?
No.
Oh, okay.
At least not that I've read, because they did the DLC and that was about enough. Eric, I think that is, that's pretty solid coverage. You know, where can people find you, Eric?
Well, you can find me all over social media at Erik Slader. That's Erik with the K, Slader with the D. D is in Delta. Once again, for more on the historical Mongol invasions of Japan, you can check out Corey and I on episode 27 of Epik Fails of History. That's Epic with a K. I'm also on Too Young for This Trek, Podcasters Assemble, Comic Zombie, and the Super Switch Club.
And I'm pretty sure we'll end up hearing from you again on some future episode. Erik, you take care, bud, and we'll see you around.
Sounds good. You as well, man.
Deuces.
Later.
Now, I didn't really feel a need for other sections since this interview accomplished what it needed to. So thanks a lot, Erik, and y'all should go check out his other content. His other podcast ventures like Podcasters Assemble, Comic Zombie, and Epik Fails of History. That's Epic with a K. Also peep his historical books and new cyberpunk novella available at any bookstore, anywhere you order online. Links will be in the Whatchamahoosit. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach me at Twinbee Podcast on all social media platforms or twinbeepodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the YouTube channel because I'm still posting stuff there like this. Yeah, that's all I got to say. Deuces.